what's up? Today I'm gonna show you guys how to make a 30-minute stir-fry noodle dish inspired by the Hong Kong classic Dan Dan noodles. This dish is vibrant, full of fun textures and flavors, and it's got a lot of protein and a lot of vegetables, so it's not just delicious junk food. This is Weeknighting. So to make this thing, I'm gonna grab a 4-quart saucepan full of water and drop it on the stove and bring it up to a boil. While that comes up to a boil, we're gonna make the Dan Dan sauce for this dish. And when I say Dan Dan, I use that term pretty loosely here because this is not a super authentic version of this dish. This is kind of my weeknight approximation that is in the spirit of Dan Dan and kind of tastes like it, but it's also a different thing that's delicious, but not the authentic version.
What is Dan Dan?
I think it's like one of those bamboo poles that has baskets on either side, and they would put noodles in those baskets, and I think those baskets were called Dan Dan. So I've got a little container here, and now I'm gonna mix everything together. I'm gonna start with 125 grams of chicken stock. This is to kind of just make things saucy later on. It doesn't necessarily need to bring a ton of flavor. Next, I'm gonna add in 40 grams of hoisin. Next, in goes 10 grams of sugar, then 30 grams of tahini sauce. Now, this dish is normally made with a Chinese sesame paste that's made from toasted sesame seeds. Most people don't have access to that, so we're going with tahini, which is made from untoasted sesame seeds, and you can get that at most grocery stores here in the US. Or if you can't find tahini, regular peanut butter would totally work as well. Okay, behind that, I'm gonna add in 40 grams of mirin, then 40 grams of soy sauce, and then 5 grams of sesame oil, and then lastly, but kind of most importantly here, I'm gonna add in 2 grams of Chinese 5-spice. Chinese 5-spice is just a blend of 5 different spices, including fennel seed, star anise, cinnamon, clove, and most importantly, Szechuan peppercorn. And if you haven't had a bunch of Szechuan peppercorn, people describe it as being kind of spicy or hot, but that's not how I would describe it. It has more of like a psychedelic numbing flavor on your tongue. It makes sweet things taste kind of sour and generally just kind of confuses you. It's really delicious. It sounds weird, but it tastes quite good in moderation. I think 2 grams of this 5-spice here is gonna be more than enough. And don't worry about getting the tahini 100% stirred in because that's gonna get tossed with everything later on and it's gonna get totally unified. The next step here before we start cooking anything is to finish up a little bit of knife work. The first part of which is gonna be to cut some broccolini. Normally this dish doesn't have a lot of vegetables in it, but for me, eating on a weeknight, gotta have vegetables. And for me, broccolini is like the ultimate weeknight vegetable because you can eat it at any level of cookedness. It's good raw, it's good blanched, it's good hammered, and it's just super versatile and almost impossible to screw up.
And nutritious.
That's right, you gotta have a little bit of fiber and a little bit of micronutrients in your weeknight repertoire. That's how you say it. To prep this, I'm just gonna cut off the stem end here. That stuff's a little bit woody. Then I'm gonna cut the stems all the way up to the florets into coins that are slightly less than 1/4 of an inch. Another reason that I chose broccolini here is that it seems like a good fit for a Chinese noodle dish. It's almost like gailan, which is one of my all-time favorite Chinese vegetables. By the way, when you get to the top here with these florets, just kind of cut them in half. We want to break them down a little bit, but we don't want them to be like completely destroyed into tiny pieces. If you haven't had gailan before, it's kind of like bok choy, spinach, and broccoli all at the same time. It's got a variety of textures, it's super flavorful, and I really, really like it, but it's kind of hard to get. And just like the Chinese sesame paste that I mentioned earlier, you're definitely gonna have to go out of your way to get it, so broccolini is kind of the next best thing. In total, I need 200 grams of broccolini. That's 1 bunch from the grocery store, or about a ½ pound's worth. So I'm gonna set this aside, and then I'm gonna cut up 2 more things to finish out our knife work before we get started. Since this is a stir-fry noodle dish, you kind of need to have everything in its right place before you get going because it all happens really quickly, and if you don't got it, then you gotta run around, and you're gonna be stressed, and everything's gonna get wrecked. All right, so the next thing is gonna be some scallions. I've got a small bunch here. I'm just gonna lop off the sort of rough tops. Now I'm just gonna cut these scallions into thin 1/8-inch pieces. I don't want them too thick because they're gonna be going on raw at the end, and I really wanna minimize the amount of like aggressive onion flavor. Okay, the last thing I'm gonna chop up are some peanuts. I've got some toasted ones here, and I'm gonna run my knife through 5 or 6 times. And once I've got these chopped down and there's no more whole pieces of peanut, I'm gonna grab a little fine mesh strainer here, scoop the peanuts into that, and then sift out the fine peanut dust. You don't have to do this, but In my opinion, it makes the experience of eating chopped peanuts on top of something just a lot nicer. I don't like when you get the peanut flour in the mix. It can make the dish gluey and the peanut flour gets kind of hydrated and I just don't love it. And once I've got these peanuts chopped up and sifted and I've got my broccolini, my scallions, and my sauce all mixed together, that concludes the mise en place portion of this recipe and it's time to start cooking. Now I'm using a 12-inch nonstick pan here over a wok because I want to make this recipe as accessible as possible, and the way that I've designed it, we don't necessarily need the super high heat of the wok. Plus, these things are smoky, hard to clean, and most people watching this video aren't gonna have access to one. So for that reason, we're gonna be using the 12-inch pan. Okay, now at this point, my mise en place is totally ready. I've got all of my cut veggies, I've got my sauce, I've got my noodles, and I've got a couple of extra things we're gonna be adding here in just a second. So now it's time to start cooking. I'm gonna turn my burner up to medium high and let that preheat for a minute or two. And once it's hot, I'm gonna add in a little squiggle of high smoke point neutral oil. While that heats up, I'm gonna quickly thank Made In for making this cool 12-inch saute pan and for sponsoring this video.
At this point, I use Made in Cookware almost exclusively, mainly because their products are very good. In fact, they're so good that Made in Cookware is used in multiple Michelin-starred restaurants. And having worked in 2 different Michelin-starred restaurants myself, I can confidently say that what Made in offers truly is professional quality, but it's professional quality that's designed to be used by the home cook. Kind of like the recipes that I developed for this channel, actually. The 12-inch nonstick that I'm using today is one of my favorite pieces for weeknight cookery because it gives me a nice big double cured nonstick surface so I can cook plenty of food at once, and it can go from stovetop to oven up to 500F, and best of all, it's super easy to clean. It's one thing to cook Dan noodles quickly, but you don't want to follow that up with another 30 minutes of hard to wash pots and pans. I truly love this product and pretty much everything else that Made In makes, and I give this brand my highest recommendation. If you want to check out Made In's nonstick collection and all of the other great cookware that they make, use the link in my description and you'll save some money on your next order. Thank you, Made In.
Once my oil's hot, I'm gonna add in 12 ounces of ground pork. And I'm gonna grab my beef mushing tool and give that a proper smashing in this pan to break it down as much as I can. I want the meat to be as crumbled down as possible so that it integrates with the noodles. Also, if you're wondering about an alternative meat to pork, because I know a lot of people don't eat pork, ground chicken thigh would be a good option, or ground beef actually works. If you check out my craveable meals in 1 hour video from a couple months ago, we made a dish that's really similar to these Dan noodles, and in that video we actually used ground beef and it was really delicious. And when this pork crosses this point where it's half raw, half cooked, this is really the sweet spot where you can easily get it broken down. If you were to let this sear on the first side for a long time and get cooked most of the way through and then try to break it down, it would be really difficult and it would take a long time and you really wouldn't get a great result. In total, cooking this pork should only take maybe 3 minutes. Once we're in this range, we've got a nice crumbled mix of pork that's most of the way cooked. I'm gonna run over to my stove and drop my noodles. Specifically, I'm gonna drop 200 grams of thick spaghetti into my boiling water here. But Bri, spaghetti isn't Asian. I know, but again, I wanted to make a recipe that was super accessible for everybody at home. So all of the ingredients that I'm using here can pretty easily be found at a traditional Midwestern grocery store that doesn't really have anything fancy. Also, in developing this recipe, we tried quite a few different noodle options from the grocery store, including udon and somen and a couple of other Asian wheat noodles. And none of them were as good as good old-fashioned thick spaghetti, which is kind of surprising, but also kind of delightful. That means that everybody can play at home and they have access to the noodles that we're using here. Coming back over to my pork now, you can see it's getting to the point where it's maybe starting to take on some color. We'll give it just a little bit more smashy to get it nice and crumbly. Now, I'm gonna call that good as far as crumbled down pork. I'm gonna move on to my next step, which is gonna be adding in my chopped up broccolini. And I'm gonna sweat that down with the pork just to get it cooked a little bit. So I'm gonna give that probably 3 minutes over medium-high heat with the pork and let it kind of steam down. And I'll give it a small pinch of salt too, because we salt in stages. Yeah, looking back at this, I've got a couple of florets here that are a little bit big. I don't want anything too chunky in here. Like I said, we want kind of a homogeneous situation. So if you see any super big florets, just kind of tear those down. So the next step here is gonna be to add in the main thing that's gonna bring heat to this dish, which is chili crisp. I'm using the Fly by Jing brand here because it has a delightful Szechuan edge to it. But I would also recommend the Lao Gama brand. That stuff is really Szechuan-y and it has that numbing psychedelic vibe. You could sub in sambal. I would just say use half the amount. And by the way, I've put in 125 grams of chili crisp at this point. And I'm just gonna sizzle it with the pork and the broccoli to kind of open up its flavor and get it really, really well infused with the two things in this pan already. Okay, I'm gonna turn the heat down to low here now because my pasta still has a minute or two. I don't wanna overcook this stuff, so I'm just gonna kind of put this into a holding pattern for another 1 to 2 minutes while my pasta finishes cooking. About 30 seconds before my pasta is ready, I'm gonna add my Dan Dan sauce in, and then quickly over medium-high heat, bring that up to a simmer so it's ready for my noodles. Okay, my pasta timer is going off. I'm just gonna snatch one of these little MFers out of here real quick and taste it hot. Oh boy. Perfect. It's just past al dente. I mean like 3% just past al dente. You don't want it too snappy because it's not gonna hold sauce well. There's no butter or Parmesan here like there would be in Italian cooking to help the sauce grip the noodles. So now I'm just gonna move these over. You don't need to be too shy about dripping water in. We want this dish to be saucy, and by the way, these noodles are gonna absorb a lot of this sauce as they sit in here. So if it looks a little wet at first, don't fret, it's gonna all work out. So I'm gonna get rid of this pasta water. Ooh, got some in my ankle. Woo, that's hot. All right, now it's time to finish this thing. So I'm gonna give it a quick toss and swirl, trying not to overflow the sides. And this is similar to the tossing we would do with an Italian dish. As I do this, the starch on the pasta is gonna release into the sauce, and that's gonna help up the viscosity and make it more creamy. If you were to just stir it, it'd be a good result, but the great creamy texture is gonna come from a little bit of a toss. You wanna give it a try?
I'm not the cook of this family, so I'm gonna see if anybody can do it. Nope.
Push it forward, pull it back. Push it forward, pull it back. Push
Hey.
forward.
Push pull. Okay, that's not so bad.
Yeah, that's a pretty good job. Okay, a couple more tosses, and that looks really epic. Oh man, you can see it's nice and creamy. There's plenty of meat spread throughout the noodles, and the broccolini is also kind of spread homogeneously throughout. So now it's time to plate this thing up. As far as portion size goes here, this is gonna make 4 medium-sized portions or 2 like absolutely massive big dog portions. It kind of just depends on how hungry you are and what kind of work day you've had. Now, to garnish this, I'm gonna hit it with a strong pinch of those raw scallions. Then I'm gonna hit it with another big dose of those chopped peanuts. And then the final step is to put some sesame seeds right on top. I mean, look at that, dude. That is so beautiful. And that's on a weeknight in less than 30 minutes. Time to give it a taste. Oh my God, that is insanely delicious. It's salty, it's sweet, there's umami here, it's the right amount of spicy, there's crunchy peanuts on top, plus you're getting this big comfort angle from eating saucy noodles. I really hope you guys make this recipe. If you do, please comment down below. And if you want another video where I show you how to make a 30-minute weeknight supper, then please check out that video for 30-minute shrimp tacos. I'll see you there. And now, let's eat this thing.
Say it normal.
Let's eat this thing. Did we get it?